All right, welcome to another AVID chat. David Harpole, Jack Arnold, great to see you, Jackson.
Good to see you, Dave.
If you've been joining into our series of 5 Degrees of Financial Freedom, this is number 4, and we're going to talk about a word that may come across a little bit more technical than we intend it to. And it really does piggyback off our last one, which was protecting you and yours, where we talked about not really insurances, but just overall being protecting your financial state, your well-being, so that over time you can continue to build wealth and move the ball forward, so to speak. So today's topic is titled compounding. And I think of the word compounding first and foremost as a financial term, compounding interest. And that's not always what we mean when we talk about it. So I guess to start us off, Jack, what do you interpret that word to mean in the essence of 5 degrees of freedom?
I would say, it is financial compounding is one of them. Obviously, it's kind of these little things adding up over the course of time end up being really big things, many times incomprehensible things. It's hard to really describe what's something doubling over a certain amount of time, what it actually ends up being, how quickly it goes there. And that a lot of times benefits or consequences, I guess, or a lot of times they're far out in the sense that they're not next week, but they're not so far out that they're 100 years from now. They tend to be kind of in a intermediate, I guess, type of range, but the effects, like the impacts, are usually pushed out towards the end of whatever period you're talking about. So the things just kind of I think people have generally heard compounding, things compound over time, but it's very difficult to even fathom what that really means. And it's hard to even sometimes have the patience to wait because, like I said, it is normally towards the end of whatever period you're talking about where the biggest changes are seen.
So from a financial standpoint, the compounding could be something like you're investing early on and your accounts, if you will, are going up monthly or slowly as you are making progress, and maybe you have a decent amount of return in there, but it's not like earth-shattering. But then once you start to get big numbers and more zeros, $500,000, $1 million, $2 million, those numbers, when they start to double, I think is where, I guess from a financial standpoint, you would maybe see the impacts of, okay, doubling my money is a big deal. If I have 5,000 and I double it to 10, it's a lot of money, but it's not 500 to $1 million.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I guess depending on what you are investing it in, let's say we talk about the stock market as just an example. As far as like the capacity for something to do that. So if you have $500,000, chances are that whatever you invest that money in, that you're not going to necessarily affect the return of the stock market. Your $500,000 is, an ounce of water in the ocean of the investments. Like, it's such a small amount. There's like endless capacity. However, on the lower range. So I'll give you an example. A lot of times there's certain capacity constraints to certain types of investments, whether that's like your time or just the market's not that big. So I'll give you an example. You can go around to these flea markets or whatever. Not flea markets, garage sales. People go to garage sales and they'll find things at garage sales. They're $10 or whatever, and then they'll sell them on eBay. And like, you can get, like, if you're talking percentage returns, like, you could go crazy with that. Like, you could buy something at a garage sale for $5 if you know what you're doing. You go online, you sell it for $50. Like, it's what is that return? 10,000% or something. But $50 is not life-changing. At some point, you can't invest $1 million in garage sales and get the same type of return. There's a limit to that. There's only so much. That's not to say that it's not worth the time, but there's an upper limit. Like most of the things that you can, like the stock market, for example, is you can do that. You can get 10%, let's say, on a $5,000 investment, and that exact same investment, let's say, could be $5 million and get you the same type of return. So, but 10% on $5 million is much different than 10% on $5,000, even though it could, in theory, be the same return. The issue being, you have to get to the point where you have that much money invested in something where it does make a difference when it goes up to that level. And a lot of times it's the slow buildup of something over time till it gets to that point, and then it starts. Then you'll see you'll make more in 1 year once you have, like, let's say it's $1 million. 1 year it goes up 10%, it's $100,000. Your account will change more in 1 year than you invested over the previous 10 years or something. Like it
Right.
That's how big the numbers get. There's the, Warren Buffett. I don't know the exact numbers, but these are going to be generally right. Something like 90% of his net worth has come after his 65th birthday. Just
That's
through
pretty amazing to think about.
It's incredible to think about, but it's a compounding thing. It's one, that was 30 years ago or more, which is a long time.
Yep.
But also just that the compounding of his wealth over that time has been exponential than it was previous to that, just because, again, it's just kind of ramped up. If you've ever seen those charts, like you'll see charts that kind of go like this, and then they just take off at the end. That's
Yes.
generally kind of compounding.
That's like half of a skateboard ramp.
Exactly.
Just-
like that giant half pipe, yes. Ramp
Yeah.
going straight up. So
how do
it's
you...
the long term.
Okay, so I just was thinking of Warren Buffett and a question, and I think, one of the difficulties is like, yeah, but it's Warren Buffett. Like, it kind of,
Right.
Me and Warren Buffett in the same sentence don't have much in common other than hopefully I make it to my late 80s and I'm still doing something, productive with life and my knowledge. But so how do you even start compounding? Like, it's, you can't just jump there. It just it doesn't show up. So I guess that would be the question. Where do you start so that you can one day get to see the benefits of it?
I mean, it's a really good question. I'll talk about two different things. One is Warren Buffett's always good just because everybody knows his name. He's an easy person to point to. There's tons of writing on his life. There's just tons of information. So he's always a good example. I think the one thing about him is let's say you added up all the things that it would take to amass a large amount of wealth. He started very early. He was saving and investing his money when he was very young. I don't know he was maybe 10 years old, 12 years old. Yeah. He had a paper out and he would save his money and like invest it in things. And so when he was really, really young, so he started extremely young, even compared to most people now, he's started extremely young. So he started his compounding journey very early in his life. But also throughout his life, he has been focused on the one thing of investing and compounding his money. I think one thing you'll notice about him, in spite of the fact that, he's at this point, I don't know what, fifth richest person, third, second, I don't know. He's up there. Relatively speaking, he doesn't have a lot of material possessions. He doesn't have, he still lives in the same house he bought in the 50s. So he lives in Omaha, Nebraska. He lives in the same house that he bought when he was 20 years old or something. So he still lived there. It's the only one that he has. I guess he had another house in California, which I think he just sold. But it's not like he has tons of homes all over the place and castles, and which he could if he wanted to. He does have a plane, which he has named the Indefensible because he says that he knows it's a waste of money. So, but for the most part, the guy's been he makes money. He just keeps his money invested and just compounds over time. So he's been really focused on doing that. But also, even early in his life, money he was making when he was managing money on his own, he was taking all of that money and reinvesting it back into his investments over and over and over again. So he's been doing it for a really long time. He's reinvested all of his money. He's old. So time has been on his side. 70 years, 80 years of investing has been on his side. He's done it in the U.S., which has been a huge gain in the stock market, even uniquely so in the entire world. And on top of all of that, which has made him exceptional, is that he's gotten great returns. But even if he just got normal returns, he would have an enormous amount of money and investments, just because he's done some things that everybody can do, and that's get started early if you can, save your money, let it grow, don't bother with it, and just keep doing it over and over and over again. So that, I think, would be one. The other thing is, I was reading the other day, so Jeff Bezos, CEO of Amazon, started Amazon. So they have AWS, which is like their cloud service, which is like the biggest part of the company, the most profitable. It's essentially kind of seems to subsidize the rest of the business. And when they were first starting that out, they're in this technical discussion about relational databases and all these different things that I don't understand, but they were talking about this, and I think the guy talking to him said, it'll probably take 10 years to kind of get this technical problem solved. And he said, I think it will take you more than 10 years to get this problem solved, so you better start today. You don't have time to waste, which I think sometimes when we think about these things, we say, oh, it's 20 years from now, I have time to start. No, you don't. You got to get started today. This is the whole... The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. So you just have to get the ball rolling and, getting compounding working in your favor. And we can talk in a second about it working in the kind of in your disfavor, the opposite of that. But starting as soon as you possibly can. If you're 20 years old, great. But if you're 40, fine. The other 20 years are coming back. Just get started and just start getting the ball moving in your favor.
Well, we've seen that multiple times being on the professional side of what we do and helping people with money and planning for the future, where we have clients today that are, I would say, large clients in terms of asset or net worth, but they didn't start until later in life. And it's almost interesting to see a little bit opposite of Warren Buffett, and they weren't like, CEOs of multi-million-dollar companies. They were just doing, I would say, regular, everyday jobs, earning a decent living, but realized I need to do something to focus for my future self that, we've said this before, inevitably is going to come, unless unfortunately you're unlucky and something happens. But what you want to do, like Jackie just said, don't say, all right, yeah, next year, we got all this stuff going on, and next year I'll start to take a look at the finances and we'll really be, be better at it next year, because that's a year too late. Start now to get the ball rolling so that 10 years from now you can look back. If you're 40, you have your 50th birthday, you can look back and say, man, I'm really proud of my 40-year-old self for getting my stuff together. Because the opposite is really where it sucks, is if you're 50, you say, oh, man, I really messed up over the last 10 years. Now I need to start doing something different, because now you're shrinking that time that you have. So,
yes,
compounding can work negatively.
Yes, and it's also cliche, the whole millionaire next door and such a. But we'll tell you from experience that's true. I mean, there's plenty of examples of that where people that are doing really well, you wouldn't otherwise know. That's not to say that there are people that that are more, I guess, showy. I don't want to make it sound negative. That it's more visible. No, but you can tell, they must have money, and they actually do. There's a lot of people that, wow, they must be doing great. And we get under the sheet, so to speak, and it's a hot mess. Exactly. If there's one thing it's kind of taught is the whole, Wizard of Oz type behind the curtain situation, is that, man, you can get fooled a lot. But by looking from the outside, and a lot of times, frequently, it's people that you wouldn't otherwise know. That doesn't mean that they're eating pork and beans, but they're just mindful of it, and they they save their money and let compounding kind of do its work. Yep.
I think you were going to mention something about the negative effects of compounding.
Yeah. So compounding, if you just say that it's kind of little things adding up over the course of time, and kind of exponentially so, and everybody thinks, you save over time and it kind of exponentially grows. That can be the opposite direction too, is kind of like negative, negative compounding in some sense. To your disfavor, it goes the opposite direction. This is the Ernest Hemingway. How did you go bankrupt? Gradually, then all at once. It's just little things over time. It's just little things over time where you're just kind of putting yourself in a bad position. But I think we even talked about this in other videos, is the feedback of doing something and then what is the result a lot of times is elongated to the point where you don't really know what the consequences are, or you don't feel them immediately. So you can do little things over time to put things in your favor, and you can do little things over time to put things in your disfavor that you don't really feel the consequences of until much later on. The unfortunate part being there's no running it back. You can't say, I got it. Now I got it now. Let me go back and I'll run it again. You should only get one go. So it's hard to, when you're not getting that feedback, to start making the good decisions that are in your favor instead of the bad ones that are in your disfavor, because a lot of times the bad ones are so much fun. Like, there's just so much cool stuff that comes along with those bad decisions sometimes. It's hard to not want to do that, especially in the short run.
Yeah, and this goes outside of finance. I mean, I think health is an easy topic to throw into that thing. You can do some really unhealthy things right now today and consistently over time that you don't really have doesn't have an impact on you until much later in life. And that's not, people always pick on smokers or something. It's not just smoking. It could be lack of exercise or just poor eating habits or all sorts of things. Just you caught up in an 8-to-5 job and you sit all day, and next thing you know, you're 65 and you have a hard time moving around because you just haven't been doing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then there's no going back. I mean, at that point is you can make it better, but you can't make it the way that it would have been had you started making those small changes not early on. And the earlier you start, obviously, the smaller the changes have to be. You don't have to, you don't have to like go over the top when you have 40 years for things to work in your favor. When it's like 4 years to work in your favor, you're like, quadrupling, quintupling down on the effort in order to get a tenth of the benefit sometimes to work in your favor. I was going to actually say one other thing is, I just want to think about this like conceptually, because obviously we've done these videos in some kind of chronological order, but you have to think like, we're talking about like compounding now, but I wouldn't think about this in isolation though. You have to think like, I've already done the other 3 degrees. I'm pointed in the right direction, or so I feel is the right direction today. I've taken the time to figure out where I'm headed. I have a good sense of my cash flow, my money, where my money's coming from, where it's going to, and that aligns with what I did in the first step. And it's pointing me in the right direction. I'm pointing in the right direction, and kind of the fuel of my cash flow is pointing me in that direction. And then I've made sure in the third kind of degree that if something does happen that I can't really control, it's out of my control, but it would destroy me if it was to happen, I've done my best to minimize those risks. Can't eliminate them completely, but I've done the best to minimize those risks. So I have on that foundation, those 3 things. Now you're at the stage where let's start compounding in my favor and not in my disfavor. Instead of what typically happens is people jump to 4. I want to compound it. I want to start getting bigger investment returns, and all those other things are not taken care of. And like we've said so many times, you're off in a direction you don't want to go, or like we've seen many, many, many times. I think people have internalized, I need to save money. I think people generally know that. They know, I need to probably be saving money. My 401k, I guess. Yeah.
Pounded down our throat since we were, 6.
So you should, and what we'll find sometimes is you'll find that people will have investment savings, 401k, IRA, whatever it may be, because they've heard that's where you put your money. But they'll also have big debts, and it's both. And you're not really moving in a direction. You're tactically saying, I'll save money. Yes, I'll do that tactic, not knowing that the whole point is to compound things over time, not to just save money. There's a point to what you're doing. So if that makes any sense. So it's not save money as compounding. It's compounding in the sense you have all these other things taken care of, and now you're moving towards that goal.
Right. Well, it's easier to jump to number 4 and just going to save money, not take the time to do the first 3, which I would say they're most important, as we've been saying, but they're probably the hardest things to do. They require the most time, the most energy, the most effort to do it. And let's face it, we all get caught up with, there's just not enough time in the day. So the default is, I'm saving over here. And it unfortunately gives you a little bit of justification of spending on the other end. Well, yeah, but at least I have this going for me. This is it.
Yes.
I don't really have it under control, but I'm not as worried about it because I do have all this stuff. I haven't forgot about my future self. My future self is there, but I also want to enjoy life. And that's there is a trade-off between the two, but I think what you're trying to say is you're going to get more impact out of stage 4, degree 4 compounding if you've taken the time to do the first 3 first. Exactly correct. This is the bamboo
grows roots for, I don't know, it's a while, 6 months, a year. You know, it's laying these roots way into the ground. But once it starts growing, it grows like a foot a day or some ridiculous amount. But it spends a lot of time putting down a foundation of roots before it starts to do that. But once it starts to do that, it just
takes off.
It flies up, and that's how it works. Like, you get these other three taken care of and you really do the work to lay a foundation. When you get to the compounding stage, it takes off because it's moving in the direction you want it to go. You've got the cash flow to commit to it, or whatever, the resources or the time, whatever it is. Nothing's going to blow it up, or at least you've minimized the risk, and it's just off to the races, as opposed to not doing that. And you always have these little setbacks that, because you haven't taken care of those other three things, it never really gets a chance, because you're always having setbacks because those other things aren't taken care of.
Yep. I think that's great. So be mindful of the first three steps before you enter into compounding to really get the most out of it. So thanks for joining us again for 5 Degrees of Freedom. Next week, we're going to talk about why reviewing and maintenance is so important to the first 4 that you've now spent so much time and effort and energy on. Jack, as always, good to see you. Good chat.
All right. See you, Dave.
Talk to you.